social media, the hatred. They also go home down to town hall meetings. If you're a Democrat, chances are pretty good. If you're Nancy Pelosi and you go home to your district, everybody's going to be asking Nancy Pelosi, why are Republicans so evil? Why are they so this? Why are they so that? Well, if you are a Republican, you're going to go home to a district where everybody asks, why are Democrats so evil? Because the gerrymandered districts and the fact that we are sorting ourselves out selectively, everybody goes home, and they go home to a bubble.
Well, Joe, I think that very carefully we have to talk about the added dynamic here, because you have the right and the left, the extremes on the right and the left. You have fake news. You have conspiracy theorists who are really muddying the waters. And we have become desensitized. We also have a president who pushes fake news and conspiracy theories, from birtherism to promoting violence on the campaign trail. I mean, this is the new dynamic here. I'm not putting anything squarely on the president, but I have to say that this is the new added dynamic to what is a very dangerous climate. Joining us from Capitol Hill.
It is a long time coming. It is 20, 30 years coming. And yes, we've spoken about Donald Trump. But if Donald Trump were to leave Washington tomorrow, we would have the same problems that we had the 30 years before Donald Trump was here. This is a systemic problem, and it's been with us for a long time. And you and I were talking about this to audiences 10 years before Donald Trump became president. I am not saying that it is not increasingly destructive when you have a man that suggests that the HUD secretary is like a child molester or makes fun of people with disabilities. No, that has taken it to a whole new level.
Says to hit people on the campaign trail and he'll pay their legal fees. This is different. That is the end. That is the conclusion of a 30-year ramp up. That is not the beginning of something. That is the conclusion of it. And we have to understand that we need to step back from the precipice. And as Paul Ryan said, and Nancy concurred, we are one family. And that is something that members of Congress, the Senate, and the House need to say every day. And that's something that people on cable news at night need to start saying every day. That's what people on talk radio need to be saying every day. And those conspiracy theorists that are preaching hate need to be shunned. We are one family. As Benjamin Franklin said, we have a republic if we can keep it. And we can only keep it if we figure out how to work together and get along. Joining us from Capitol Hill, Republican Congressman Mark Sanford of South Carolina. How are you doing this morning? Thank you for being on.
My pleasure.
I guess, first of all, I'd like you to comment on the events of the past 24 hours and also the conversation that you just heard Joe, Mike, and I having.
The last 24 hours have been somewhat surreal here on Capitol Hill. As Joe can attest, the idea of going off to practice for the congressional baseball game and having a shooter show up and shooting one member and shooting at others is about the last thing in the world you would think possible here in and around the Capitol. But it was what it was, and people were reacting to it. So I think the it's been somewhat surreal. As to what you all were talking about, indeed, we're at an inflection point. There are forces at play that I've never seen before over the roughly 20 years I've been involved in politics. Joe and I came in together way back when. And it is indeed different. And I think we have to watch out as a society, because if we don't watch out, civility is indeed a part of civilized government and an open political system. And if you let these forces play out, I think we end up at a very, very bad spot. And I think what happened yesterday was symptomatic of it.
Go ahead, Harold.
And Mark, good morning. Harold Ford.
Yes, sir.
Send my regards and prayers to everybody there. Two things. One, I grew up in Washington, as Joe was talking about that civility that existed. I watched Republicans and Democrats come through my home for dinner parties and attended school, elementary and middle and high school with colleagues, my dad's colleagues, Democrat, Republican alike. But we seem to have progressed to a point, you know, you have people getting elected to the Senate and the House, an intramural fight saying, this person shouldn't be there because they work with the other party. It happens with Republicans, happens with Democrats. How do we dial that back? Do you see this moment being a big inflection point for a lot of things? But I hope it's an inflection point for a willingness for members of Congress to show that they can work together across the aisle, and perhaps for all of us to tamp down the rhetoric that you shouldn't be punished for wanting to work with the other side to get something meaningful done. You see that as being one of these moments that could be a catalyst for that?
I think so. I mean, there is some heavy soul searching going on right now because it was so dramatic and because it was so out of the ordinary and because people realized were it not for those 2 Capitol Hill police, it would have been a bloodbath. Maybe there would have been 15 or 20 members of Congress dead on a given day. And so I think that people are registering it as such. What, you know, the Speaker said yesterday, Nancy said in reaction to what the Speaker said yesterday, I think is symptomatic of people saying, well, wait a minute, we got to find a way to slow this down. What I would say is, I was at a town hall meeting. I've done a number of town hall meetings over the last number of months back home. It was at a senior center, a retirement center, and what took place in terms of people saying certain things to each other was like out of a movie. And so we've got to find a way to dial this back. I would give you an example of people trying to do that in a small way. There's a climate solutions caucus here in the Congress, and what they said is for every Democrat that goes on, you can't get on unless there's a Republican that goes with you. And I think there probably ought to be a little bit more pairing, whether it's on a caucus form or whether it's in legislative form here in Washington. I think people are going to be looking for ways to do just that.
Mark Halperin.
Congress, what are you worried about today in the aftermath of yesterday?
That we won't learn from it. I mean, history is a great teacher if we look back and actually examine it. If we examine what, you know, Mika was talking just a moment ago, I would argue that the president has unleashed is partially, again, not in any way totally, but partially to blame for demons that have been unleashed, whether it's what I saw at a senior center back home in people saying F you and F you and F you to each other at a senior center, a retirement center, where they're going to see each other playing croquet the next day, or with what happened, again, not with what happened yesterday, but the fact that, you know, you've got the top guy saying, well, I wish I could hit you in the face, and if not, why don't you, and I'll pay your legal fees. That's bizarre. We ought to call it as such. And what I've said, you know, back home when some of these people have been, frankly, weird and different in a town hall meeting, I said, what is going on? And they'll say, look, if the guy at the top could say anything to anybody at any time, why can't I? I think we all need to look for ways to learn from what happened yesterday and to say, wait a minute, this is a pause moment.
Yeah.